October 23, 1942. Dawn breaks over the Egyptian desert near El Alamein. Inside the steel hulls of their Carro Armato M1340 tanks, Italian crews from the Ariete Armored Division prepare for what will become the largest armored clash in North African history. With 104 rounds of 47mm ammunition and 4 Bardia machine guns ready, 278 tanks roar to life. These men believe they are the vanguard of Italian power. Within hours, they will learn the truth, that their machines, their tactics, and their nation's industrial capacity are hopelessly outmatched. When the Americans' new M4 Sherman tank appears on the battlefield, the illusion of parity will vanish, replaced by a revelation that reshapes how these men see their country, their enemy, and themselves. The story begins years earlier, in 1937, when the Italian army sought a new tank to replace outdated models. The result, the M1340, seemed promising. A 47mm gun in a rotating turret, 30 to 42mm of armor, and a reliable 125 horsepower diesel engine. By 1940, production was in full swing, and over 700 tanks rolled off Fiat and Ansaldo assembly lines. Italian crews believed they had entered the modern age of armored warfare, until the desert proved otherwise. Training was rushed, radios were scarce, and tactics were outdated. When the British launched Operation Compass in December 1940, the M1340's baptism by fire at Bardia ended in catastrophe. 40,000 Italian soldiers lost, and hundreds of tanks destroyed or captured. Yet the tank's early failures weren't due to design alone. They stemmed from inexperience, poor coordination, and the brutal environment. By 1941, lessons were being learned. Italian tank crews trained harder, communications improved, and cooperation with German forces refined their tactics. At Bir el Gubi, in November 1941, the Ariete Division stood its ground against British Crusader tanks and won a tactical victory, proving that courage and coordination could balance out technological inferiority. But the gap widened again in 1942, when Allied forces introduced the American-built M3 Grant, whose 75mm gun outranged the Italian 47mm, and then, in October 1942, came the Sherman, a machine that would redefine armored warfare and shatter the myth of fascist superiority. The Second Battle of El Alamein opened with a thunderous Allied barrage. When the dust cleared, Italian crews saw silhouettes advancing through the haze. Taller, broader, and slower-moving tanks that radiated confidence. The M4 Sherman, with 64mm of sloped frontal armor and a 75mm gun capable of destroying an M1340 from over a kilometer away, was everything the Italians' tanks were not: powerful, reliable, and forgiving. The first encounters were slaughter. Sherman rounds tore through Italian armor. Even non-penetrating hits sent deadly rivets ricocheting inside crew compartments. Italian gunners fired bravely, but their shells bounced off the Sherman's angled hulls. Only by closing to suicidal range could they hope for a kill. By the battle's end, of 278 Italian tanks, fewer than 30 remained. The defeat was total. But it was not just tactical. It was existential. Those who survived and were captured soon began another kind of education. Transported to the United States as prisoners of war, thousands of Italian tankers witnessed something unimaginable: a society whose industrial might dwarfed the combined efforts of all Axis nations. On Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic, they saw abundance, food, machinery, and efficiency on a scale Italy could not dream of. At Norfolk, Virginia, they stepped into a world of electric cranes, floodlit shipyards, and endless trains. Even as prisoners, they traveled in passenger cars, not cattle wagons, and ate better than Italian officers. In camps like Hereford, Texas, they found electric lights, heated barracks, and hospitals with X-ray machines. They saw refrigerators, mixers, and kitchens that discarded more food daily than Italian villages consumed in weeks. When assigned to farms and factories, they worked alongside American civilians who owned cars, homes, and radios, ordinary workers living in comfort. At Ford's Willow Run plant, they watched a new bomber roll off the line every hour. One factory produced more aircraft in a month than Italy could in a year. It became clear the Allies hadn't won through luck or numbers. They had won through a system that made abundance a natural outcome. These prisoners, once proud fascists, began to see the truth. American democracy had outproduced totalitarian efficiency. Free workers built better machines faster than coerced laborers. Where Mussolini preached control, America thrived through liberty. Italian officers attended lectures on economics and democracy. They saw that power and prosperity didn't require tyranny. Newsreels of the D-Day invasion, 6,000 ships and 11,000 aircraft in a single operation, confirmed what they already suspected. Italy had challenged an industrial titan with obsolete tools and empty ideology. After Italy's surrender in September 1943, 90% of Italian prisoners volunteered for the Allied cause. They donned U.S. uniforms, joined Italian service units, and worked to support the war effort, not out of fear, but conviction. When they finally returned home after 1945, they brought more than memories. They carried ideas about democracy, production, and dignity. They helped rebuild a shattered nation, applying what they'd learned from American farms and factories to revitalize Italy's industry and agriculture. The seeds of Italy's post-war economic miracle were planted not in Rome or Milan, but in the POW camps of Texas and Oklahoma. In total, Italy built just over 3,000 tanks on the M1340 chassis. America built more than 49,000 Shermans. One U.S. factory produced in a month what took Italy a year. That simple ratio of output, of power, of possibility explains the war's outcome better than any battlefield map. Yet it also explains what came after. The Italian tankers who once believed in fascism returned home as believers in freedom. Men like Second Lieutenant Luigi Arbib Pascucci, who led a doomed counterattack at El Alamein to buy his comrades time to retreat, embodied their courage. His sacrifice earned Italy's highest military honor, and today his name adorns the 13th Tank Battalion. His commander, General Francesco Arena, sent his last message from the battlefield. Ariete surrounded, tanks still fighting. It became legend, a symbol of bravery amid hopeless odds. British historians later acknowledged that, given proper training and leadership, Italian soldiers fought as hard as any in the desert. In the end, the story of the M1340 and its crews is not just about defeat, it is about revelation. The men who faced the Sherman tanks at El Alamein learned the hard way that courage cannot compensate for industrial weakness. But they also discovered that the strength of a nation lies not in its ideology, but in its ability to create, innovate, and care for its people. They entered the war as instruments of fascism. They emerged from it as witnesses to freedom. Men whose journey from the burning sands of Egypt to the farms and factories of America helped forge the foundations of a democratic Italy. The eerie rumble of diesel engines on that October morning in 1942 marked not just the start of a battle, but the beginning of a transformation, one that turned defeat into enlightenment, and soldiers of a broken empire into builders of a new nation.